One. Camera is monocular, person is binocular. Therefore, some depth information is lost in the photograph. 2. Focusing is different, etc., etc. Now, that's very little material, and this was picked at random. I just threw this open and picked this at random. So let's back up on that a bit. First place, I mean, it should go without saying that it's obvious that the person who wrote this does not only not know how to write, but has no comprehension whatsoever of the English language. Differences between camera vision and live vision. All right, now I mean in the simplest sense of the word, live vision has to mean the vision of all living things. Without making any differentiation, so I mean I immediately am prepared to, I have that in my mind, the camera, the vision. I don't know what camera vision would mean to begin with, but I'll grant him that kind of a sliding thing because people in daily, everyday language might make that kind of a mistake. But differences between camera vision and live vision. Camera is monocular, person is binocular. Well, I mean, person, if you mean all live, and if the man who wrote this or woman were so gracious as to extend person to insects, although one would think if they were going to do that, that some little footnote would be necessary to qualify that, then it's obvious that that's not true at all. Person is not then necessarily binocular. Therefore, some depth information is lost in the photograph. What the hell does that mean? I mean, that doesn't mean anything at all, or else if it is purporting to mean something, it's incredibly ridiculous. Some depth information is lost in the photograph? I mean, in the first place, in one sense, everything that is on the film in a photograph is focused. I mean, because it's passed through a lens system which will focus it, even though the photograph might be called from an aesthetic viewpoint out of focus. But it's still focused. So there's a choice. Whether you're shooting the distant horizon or someone's nose in front of your face, there is a choice to shoot either one of those subjects at 2 inches or infinity if the lens will focus in that sense. Well, I mean, here focus is not, is used in the most incredibly sloppy way. And I mean, and even so, even if you accept the sloppiness of it in the way of normal everyday senses of technical focus, the statement still isn't true. I mean, I don't want to go on with this except to say that for God's sake, if you're going to be subjected to material like this at the University of Pittsburgh, then you've got to begin reading poetry intensively, where you have to read to know how to read. You have to teach yourself, or let the poetry teach you how to read, or else forget it. I mean, else you'd best pick up all your knowledge on the street, because it'll certainly make more sense than anything picked at random that I could find in this entire book. And yet, again note, as I said about journalism, journalism has the premise that it tells the truth. They have an incredible lie that premises the whole concept of telling truth. And I mean, and of course they don't tell it. They're even further from telling the truth than, a bold-faced liar. Their front makes it so. And generally this kind of writing and this kind of meaning nothing English or psychology English or whatever you want to call it usually occurs in psychology or sociology courses or things of that sort. Philosophy. Some schools have produced that kind of thing in the area of philosophy. I'm glad I got this. I'm glad someone handed this to me, because I do need to be reminded that, I mean, people have to be warned that if they are not going to busy themselves to teach themselves how to read, then they will be, I mean, incredibly enslaved by the most incredibly stupid people the rest of their lives. It makes me too mad to be...
Could I say something as the
Yeah.
incredibly stupid person who wrote that?
Did you actually write it?
Yes, and I think that maybe you should give me a chance to say something.
I'll have to, but I mean, I assumed that someone else wrote it, and you were giving me an example to, but you know what I think.
Well, yeah, I was going to say that it's in pretty bad taste to get up in front of a group like this and attack someone who, in innocent good faith, gave it to you to read because I thought you might be interested. Okay, you don't appreciate that perhaps, but I think that I do. Now the other thing is that if you look at the front of that, they are lecture notes. It's not a book. They're notes. There are plenty of incomplete sentences in there. And you apparently don't appreciate my approach or try to understand my material, but I would invite you to come to my class and maybe you would. I don't understand your films, perhaps, and I'm trying, with an open mind, trying to watch them and appreciate them.
I have to acknowledge that on everything but a personal human level, you are, with that text, my deadliest enemy. That is the deadliest enemy of everything that I do deeply care about. On a human level, that's never true. But on the level of safeguarding the values and the traditions of all human life, I myself, from what I have gathered from this book, it horrifies me.
Well, I think you misunderstand the whole thing, because I'm sure from my course, you're going to gain fans and other independent
I don't care for fans. Fans is what I am absolutely against. Fans I not only do not need, but I have bothered myself this entire last year, struggling with great energy to warn people that to make any kind of a hero of me or to attend my films as being of any more use than they are personally to you is the deadliest of all possible mistakes.
Well, I didn't mean fans in that sense. I mean that I think it's nice that people can appreciate nice things, and I consider your films to be nice things.
That's always a pleasure.
Okay, well, I don't think there's anything wrong with letting other people find that out either. And I think that I'd like to know what your criticisms of the book are, because of the material in the book, not necessarily now, but I'd be interested as to why that makes me your enemy.
Okay.
Because I don't understand.
Differences between camera vision and live vision. 1. Camera is monocular, person is binocular. Therefore, some depth information is lost in the photograph. Now, if you did really hear that, then you know what our differences of opinion are.
Well, tell me. Because
I just did, and I mean, I cannot, in all fairness, devote the entire evening to quarreling with you about this paper. I have to say in my own behalf, I had no idea you'd written it. If you had, I certainly would not have put you in what's an unbearable spot, and I apologize for the circumstances that caused that. I had no idea you'd written it. I assumed it was something that was handed to you in a course or that came your way and that you were extending on to me to find out what I thought of it. And I took it home in good faith and interest to see, I mean, the picture on the cover intrigued me. And I opened it up and began to read. And I began to be increasingly horrified at a use of language that to me is absolutely inexcusable, and that on top of it, that was premised in an area that carries the weight and assumption of meaningfulness of language. And you saw I cannot blame myself. What we call this, or what I would call it in my life when it's happened to me, is an arrangement of the gods, that it suddenly falls out that a human being says what they think of something that you have done in all innocence. That is, not trying to put you personally on the spot, but trying, in fact, I had you in mind. I did not say who handed this to me to begin with. I didn't want to put you on that kind of spot either. But that I felt so much that whoever, assuming that you were someone who was given this and was passing it on to me, I was trying to save you from the bad effects of this writing.
I think I can be saved, but I really don't feel that uncomfortable, so I don't think you have to apologize anymore for that. But to tell you the truth, when I gave it to you, I thought that there might be parts of it that you might not like, especially some of the comments you made about perspective, for example. I don't know if you got to that part in the book, but that's in there.
Someone else gave me a...
How can I say it? Not only the extent to which that is trained, but also how artificial a thing, how artificial a set of rules it's premised upon, and yet, artificial though they may be, how dependent one is upon them because of the way the streets are laid out, because of the way the buildings are structured, because of the dependence on print, very small print actually, the ability to read it. In fact, the whole habit of reading, which requires a specific and brutal, one might say, herding of the eyes across a page in order to accomplish that act. So I both wear them and don't wear them, and I'm playing around constantly. I'm enjoying them very much because I'm playing around with what a room is when the glasses are off, all the many things it can be that way, and how hard it is to be anything but one specific way when they're on. I mean, I put them on, and it's like looking through a incredible machine. I mean, so I'm making an adventure of it. Actually, the optometrist, I told him all of this while he was checking the eyes and so on. And he said, well, he said, I don't know how you accomplished that 20-year interim, 22-year interim, actually, because he said it's just a fact that your left eye has not improved at all since birth. And the other eye also is weak in certain ways, so whatever problems you're having, you continue from an optometrist's viewpoint, which was a very wonderful distinction. Whatever problems you've been having, you've had all along. So there was essentially no change in your vision. You should have been wearing glasses all along, in other words. I said, but I passed a driver's test with 20/20 vision. He speculated that the reason for this probably was that over the years I had memorized the test. Now, by whatever act of incredible thought process or will and combinations of those two things and many others, I have managed to see, even according to the way you're supposed to see, legally and scientifically. I don't know. It's a great mystery. But I do intend to go on playing with it. I mean, if I thought I had to, you know, for instance, there's no appeal to me at all in contact lenses or anything of that sort, because I want to be able to take these things on or off quite at will. Yes.
How did that affect your filmmaking? Did you have? I presume you didn't have to compensate when you looked through the viewfinder for focus. You were still able to focus correctly.
Yeah. A lot of people think, well, they say, well, Brakhage has so many soft focus shots in his films because he really can't see, you know. But that's ignoring totally the fact that I've had a very successful history as a commercial filmmaker, in which I even had a reputation for immaculately sharp and clear pictures.
Interesting that wouldn't matter. Do you think that would be true of anyone?
I don't know. I don't like to speculate too much about anyone in that sense. I do think, from talking with many other people about their glasses and their eyes and so on, and from reading some books on the subject, that glasses tend to be oversold in the society, even to meet the needs of the society where they're most appropriate. And those needs are premised on 20/20 vision and all the rules that accrue to that title. But there's varieties of reasons for wearing glasses, not only in terms of the musculature of the eye or physiologically speaking, but of course people's whole mental attitude in relationship to them. I don't like to see people stuck with glasses, though I don't go around advising people to throw theirs away either. I mean, that's just, all I can give is my example. And I don't know but what I won't, give up driving and throw these away. Give up driving and telephone books and throw these away in another 6 months or a year. Yes?
After 20 years of wearing glasses, I just discovered that you use the phrase driving your eyes across a printed page.
Yeah. Herding.
Herding, well.
Driving's pretty good too, actually.
Well, in any case,
Sally, did he tell you? I've been so worried about you. My God. What about the box of films?
Which box? The box
Shen?
that's there? There's
Yeah.
one box there, but sincerity isn't in it.
Yeah, I know Shen has it. Okay. But you didn't bring the box.
No, I
No,
didn't,
okay,
because
okay.
there was nothing.
It's
we'd
fine.
seen
Sit
everything
down.
the
And
other night.
I'm so relieved to see you.
Oh, how am I gonna tell him this?
Well, Sally, you know, I can take things like that. I mean, it's just a print. I've lost originals. I can take anything.
It's like,
Yes.
Anticipation of the Night was made, I think, around the time when Jonas Mekas changed his mind about you and your kind of films. I wondered, could you say how you met Jonas, and did you meet him before he changed his mind, when he was, quote, anti-Brakhage?
That's a nice story. I forget what the year was even, but there was an issue of... It was a year I lived in New York and met Willard and Marie and Willard Moss and Marie Menken and many other people, Ian Hugo. I became part of the independent filmmakers group in New York, and during the course of this year, every now and again, I would see Jonas and Adolphus Mekas. And it was told to me that they were editors of a film magazine and very passionate about films and were working on a film and so on. But they were very quiet and reserved, and there was never much exchange between us. Whenever we spoke, they spoke in very broken English for the most part. And I had no real cognizance of them until out came an issue of Film Culture, their magazine, which had on the cover, I'll never forget, Gregory Peck as Ahab in John Huston's adaptation of Melville's Moby Dick, screenplay by Ray Bradbury, with such fancy Ray Bradbury touches in it as locating the place where Ahab would discover the white whale as Bikini Atoll, which is, of course, where the hydrogen bomb went off. And it was a film that most of us despised, and I think deservedly so, for practically everything except the camera quality, which was rather extraordinary for a Hollywood movie, and and Orson Welles as the preacher delivering the great sermon. Anyway, on here came this magazine with this cover shot of Gregory Peck, and inside there was an article attacking the so-called underground film, or experimental film, I think it was called in those days. And it had what I took to be the most vicious statements against myself and all my friends, you know, that had ever been put into print up to this point. And it was by Jonas Mekas. And if any of you want to read it, it is the first, it's one of the first essays printed in the Film Culture Reader, which is sort of an anthology of film culture things from across the years. Okay, well, almost, you know, Willard Moss just went into a rage, and he said, one of the things he said, matter of fact, was they can't even write English. They can't even write English, you know. And so he began to attack the grammar. Maya Deren called me, and she said, I want you to come over immediately. We're going to sue. And I knew she must be referring to this Film Culture magazine, and I went over to her place, 61 Morton Street, I think it was, and she was in a towering rage. And Maya's rages were just incredible. I mean, her hair all stood up on end. It stood up most of the time anyway, but then it just absolutely stood up, flaring red, and pacing back and forth across the room. And I was, you know, I had no intention or even willpower to sue, but Maya said, "Oh, this is our great chance." She said, "I know they're putting out a film magazine. They've got to be rich." And she said, and they've made one mistake. She said, "They have a title here that says Conspiracy of Homosexuality." And she said, and then there's a whole column under it, and many people are mentioned, and all of them are homosexual, except for you and me. So we can sue. And she'd called her lawyer and everything, you know, and she had a big case going that she was doing some colleges, and that's how she was making some of her living in those days. And she said, and I can make the case that they won't let me come to colleges because I've been besmirched in public print as being a homosexual, and so forth and so on. And so the two of us are in a position to sue the Mekas brothers. And I just left it entirely in Maya's hands. I mean, there wasn't anything to do anyway with any project that Maya got underway. And I said, "Okay, whatever you say, Maya." And then I got a call a week later or something like that, and she asked me to come over again. And when I arrived, there were Jonas and Adolphus sitting looking very humble and contrite on Maya's, ratty old couch, while she raged and stormed back and forth in front of them at the top of her voice, with all her cats pacing and back and forth with her, and you know, and I remember vividly the picture of looking over, and there were Jonas and Adolphus just looking so thin and pale and Lithuanian and like European monks with gigantic voodoo drums on either side of them, you know, and I don't know what all, Haitian masks, and Maya's raging. And then at some point she interrupted her rage enough to turn to me and say, "Well, we're not going to sue them." She says, "It turns out they don't have any money anyway." And so they were apologizing. They apologized to me. I remember Jonas saying something like, "Well, we didn't mean anything wrong by this. We thought that this is the way I interpreted the experimental films and makers, and we were really trying to be of help to you," and so on, you know. Maya took Jonas sort of under her wing in a sense. I mean, not that Jonas didn't also have his own life. I don't mean that he became her disciple or anything like that, because for all that he had his proper humility in this situation, he also was fiercely strong, as he still is from the beginning. But she did begin to have conversation with him about these films and begin to explain things to him that she felt, and we all felt, he very much misinterpreted. And they developed such close friendship that I think within a year or two, when Jonas had to go away for a certain period, he put Maya entirely in charge of his column. You know, she wrote that series of columns, of Jonas's column, for I think most of a summer, or at least for a couple months. And also in the course of the next 2 years, Jonas's attitude changed entirely, but I wasn't around when this happened. It may have, you know, I do remember that it took Willard many more years to forgive Jonas than anyone else, and there's an incredible story was told to me from somewhere within these 2 years. Willard had his world premiere of Narcissus, and invited all kinds of people to a sort of soiree, and James Broughton happened to be in town and was there at the same time, and the Mekas brothers showed up, and Willard went into a fit, and he said, you weren't invited and you can't stay here. And they said, "Oh, please, we just want to see the film." And he said, "After the things you said about me and your despicably Lithuanian magazine on the film, and he said, you should have no business looking at films anyway. Go away and learn how to write English," and things like that. And so Adolphus took umbrage and sort of snapped something back at him, and then Willard spat in the face of Adolphus, and it reached such a pitch that Willard said, "All right, we meet in the alley right now." and chose Jimmy Broughton for his second. So it fell out that in all apparent high seriousness, Willard and Broughton and Jonas and Adolphus all departed to the alley where they yelled at each other. Apparently, maybe a little shoving went on, and Jonas and Adolphus left, you know. So it was years before Jonas lived down that article among the filmmakers. And I think it was very courageous of Jonas to, of course, P. Adam Sitney was the editor of the Film Culture Reader, but I'm sure Jonas would have had to agree to it, to allow that original article to be placed in that context in the Film Culture Reader, so that everyone can see what Jonas thought way back then, and follow the whole progression of shifting ideas and ideologies over the years. So that's the whole story as I knew, because I wasn't living then in New York anymore, and I wasn't in touch with Jonas. I didn't see Jonas again until after making Anticipation of the Night. I went back to New York during that period where Cinema 16 was refusing to distribute any more of my films, and none of them had been shown in New York for 3 or 4 years. So I went back and rented a hall and had a showing. Jonas came and was very excited about the new films, and then he and I told him that night that he said, "What are you going to do about C16 not distributing your Anticipation of the Night?" See, the Anticipation of the Night upset Amos Vogel so much, along with practically everyone else, that Amos said, well, he wouldn't distribute it. It would ruin my reputation. And I said, well, you won't get any other films of mine until this one is in distribution. So we had a standoff, and it went on for 2-3 years. And finally, by the time of this arrival in New York and re-meeting Jonas, I said to him, well, Jane and I are going to start a independent filmmakers co-op in Colorado, and because there are other filmmakers whom Amos won't distribute. And Jonas said, well, we've been thinking of doing something like that here, and so we had a meeting, Jonas and Adolphus and I, to discuss it, and it was agreed we'd pool efforts. And that's one of the ways in which the Filmmakers Cooperative was born. And that was a lovely meeting, too. I had a reservation or something like that at the Chelsea Hotel, and they couldn't fill it normally, so they gave me a beautiful room. Even though I was too broke to pay the price of this room, they gave me this beautiful room. It was filled with light, and they told me, they said, in 3 days, some painter was coming, and he had it booked, and I'd be shoved out. But those were 3 very magic days with these kind of meetings with Jonas and Adolphus in this room that was filled with light, a really posh room in the Chelsea Hotel, where we had these meetings, and in sort of calm and quiet, like a little space of calm and quiet was given to us to discuss such things. It was nice. Yes.
Can you talk about the making of Anticipation of the Night? I don't have any specific questions.
Well, I tell you, it's much better. I can, yes, but I mean, I've done so much talking about it that it's hard to. Have you read the statements in the Film Culture Reader with the interview with P. Adam Sitney?
Yeah.
Well, then there's no point repeating that story because that's available to everybody. Yes.
What
Yeah.
really interests me about it is the movement, and that it is a dance so much.
Well, maybe here's something that I don't recall ever having said before. When I made Anticipation of the Night is right at the period where I was deciding to get a car and then getting one and learning how to drive, getting a driver's license and learning how to drive. And this, of course, plays such a crucial part in the making of Anticipation of the Night. Now, oddly, not because, I wasn't driving and photographing at the same time, but in this period, I had gone back to Denver very defeated by everything previous in my life, and I was just sort of hanging on and holding a job. I applied, someone got me a job at a film company owned by a rich man named Hughes. I mean, not Howard, but another, Hughes of Denver, who was quite a wealthy man, and he had his film company as sort of a toy. It was his plaything. I mean, but not to be cruel to him also, I have to explain that he loved sound, and he was a genius with sound, and he'd in fact written some startling articles on sound engineering when he was in college. But he was a wealthy man by inheritance, and he should have been able to devote his life to this, right? But his family, like so many American families particularly, have this sense that the son must then make more money, must go into business and prove himself and make money. And the only way that this man could continue to even be near sound equipment and putter with it, which was his entire joy, was to have a motion picture company where they'd have a sound department. So, and he, because he had connections and apparently got the Martin Missile contract, that is a contract for doing the photography of the building of the Martin Missile Company and top secret things of that sort. And so I went to work there, and they told me, they said, you'll have to be passed for security work, you know. And so they took my fingerprints and everything and submitted all these things to Washington, and it would take a month to find out. Well, I figured they'll never pass me, but at least it's a month's work, right? And when they lay me off, they'll have to give me another couple weeks, and I'll have a little money at least. But lo and behold, I was passed, which just surprised me. So kind of out of lethargy, not giving a damn about anything, I went on working there, photographing all these secret missile parts, which I think I indicated got me into trouble a year later at Brussels. But during that year then, there was this desire really to, I began really being involved in motion, and I had to get a car in order to hold this job. So, and until I could learn to drive, I was at the mercy of friends driving me around continually. And I was seeing my old high school friends, and we were driving around at night and, you know, drinking beer and going to movies and things. And I got really intrigued with motion past landscape and so on. So that's one seed that begins this direction in my work. And then, of course, many of the other things have been written of. I had a very, very strong death wish at this time, which I proceeded to act out. And I had intended that this suicide